Welcome to What to Watch Wednesdays, hosted by someone's favorite film buff, Nathan. I love movies and I want to share that with you. From old originals to cult classics and foreign favorites, along with straight up drivel, WWW is your place for all things movies. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the show.
88.1 The Burg, your movie central. Welcome to What to Watch Wednesdays. My name is Nathan, the host of What to Watch Wednesdays, the show where we talk about 3 movies all in the same night. And great Scott, it feels so good to be back here on What to Watch Wednesdays. Tonight's episode is very exciting for me because I feel like the 3 movies I've picked kind of are going to set the tone for the rest of the school year pretty significantly. I've been very excited to come back here to What to Watch Wednesdays, and I'm also really excited for this school year. I'm excited for what the future holds. I'm really excited to see where things go in the future, and I'm back here at What to Watch Wednesdays, and because of those feelings of wanting to be back and wanting to look forward towards the future, I figured what better way to start off the year than talking about the Back to the Future movies. Yes, all 3 of the Back to the Future movies. Tonight's watch list is going to include the original Back to the Future from 1985, Back to the Future Part 2 from 1989, and Back to the Future Part 3 from 1990. Once again, great Scott, this is going to be a great year. I'm going to have so much fun and might as well kick it off strong. So I'm going to send you to a music break, and when we come back, we will talk about the original Back to the Future. 88.1 The Burg, your movie central. Welcome back to What to Watch Wednesdays. And for our first movie on the watch list tonight, we will be taking a look at Back to the Future from 1985, available to rent from services such as Amazon or YouTube or Fandango at home. For the basic plot summary of Back to the Future, we follow Marty McFly as he is sent back in time to 1955 via a time-traveling DeLorean invented by his friend Doc Emmett Brown. After accidentally interrupting the moment his parents first met, he must now figure out how to matchmake them so he isn't erased permanently from existence. He also needs to figure out how to get back to 1985, and he needs to, fix the time machine or, get it refueled or something like that. Hit a gas station on the way. That part isn't really important. He can completely survive just being in 1955 when he's from 1985, right? I normally get sent back to 1955 every single Thursday of my life, and every time I get there, I'm like, I don't really need to go back to 2025. I can just hang out here. And then Doc Emmett Brown shows up and he's like, get in the DeLorean, idiot, and he pulls me back in, and then he sends me back to 2025, and I'm like, dang it, I wanted to stay there. I don't know where I was going with that point, but you gotta admit, it was pretty funny. The point I was trying to make with that is, if I explain the basic plot of him, trying to reunite his parents, all of a sudden it sounds so convoluted and all over the place, and it's like, doesn't he want to get back to 1985? And I just wanted to, kind of remind you guys, yeah, he wants to get back to 1985, but he also has to make sure he doesn't get erased from existence, because he's interrupted the day his parents met. For, complete accidentally, by the way. Complete accidentally, yes, English. Really good at words today, especially for my first show back. Doesn't really matter. Here's the point. We've all heard of Back to the Future. You've heard of it. I've heard of it. Everything I said in that plot summary, except for the part about me being involved in it, is something you've heard before. You're familiar with the concept. You're familiar with the idea. Back to the Future is an 80s classic for a reason, and it is a long-standing 80s classic. It has just kind of evolved into overall classic in the realm of movies, especially for that line where Doc Brown goes, when this baby hits 88 miles per hour, we're not going to need any more roads, because I can't say the rest of that without swearing. So I'm not going to say the rest of it. I'm just going to combine it with the other famous quote. Doesn't matter. Here's the point. I will say that even though Back to the Future is an absolute classic of the 80s, it's weird for me to say this out loud, but I saw this movie once when I was a kid, and I've really just kind of put off rewatching it until I decided to do the trilogy for today's show. It's really weird to say that because I really like 80s movies. I like 80s classics. I like 80s sci-fi. I like 80s action movies. I like everything about the 80s, even though I was born after the 80s pretty significantly. It's like the decade of movies that I just seem to really gel with and really like. And I just like that authentic sort of cheesy quality they have about them. Cheesy but high quality that they have about them. So it's still really weird for me to say I just kind of put off watching Back to the Future until I decided to do the trilogy for today's episode. And now, looking back on it, I don't really know why, because Back to the Future is awesome. I liked the movie. I don't know what else to say. I shouldn't have held off on it for so long. It's the Robert Zemeckis movie. Why did I just, decide not to watch it again? I don't know. I watched this once when I was a kid, and I barely remembered anything about it. I barely remembered it. So when I rewatched it, I was like, there was no reason for me to hold off on it. I'm going to skip ahead to my next point, because if I keep going on and kind of keep beating myself up for it, we're not going to get anywhere. So let's dive into the movie itself just a little bit more. One thing that I want to emphasize is because this movie is such a classic, I'm going to give it the Star Wars treatment that I gave A New Hope, which is I'm going to talk about something that I don't think a lot of people would talk about if they were going to talk about this movie in today's day and age, because everybody's heard about it. I'm not going to analyze anything having to do with Marty and his parents and their relationship at all, and I'm instead going to talk about Doc Brown. Despite not being the main character of the movie, despite Marty McFly being the main character, Doc Brown, in my opinion, is probably the best character of the movie. He absolutely steals the show. Most of that comes down to Christopher Lloyd's performance. All of it comes down to Christopher Lloyd's performance. Not most of it, all of it. He was really well casted, and he did a really good job, and I love Christopher Lloyd a lot, and so it was just a perfect combination. I really like the overall character of Doc Brown, and I think that Christopher Lloyd fits the part really well. I say it was all down to Christopher Lloyd, but I will backtrack and say it was just mostly down to it, because part of what makes Doc Brown a good character is the idea behind him. He's this crazy, kind of eccentric, mad scientist who's just friends with this random teenager who lives in the 80s. And at first you think, oh, that's weird. Why do they have a friendship? What's the relation there? And then you look at his behavior. You look at the way he carries himself. You look at the way he interacts with Marty, and you go, hang on. He's a genuine friend. He's a helpful character in this story. He's very pivotal to the overall concept. He's the one who invented the time machine. He's kind of important, and he's not gonna betray Marty. He's not a bad person. He's a good person at heart, just a little cuckoo. He's like a mad scientist. Aren't they supposed to be evil? No, he's a good-natured guy. Interesting. Very interesting. I feel like that's a trope we should bring back. Personally, I wish we had more good-natured mad scientists out there. You know, guys who are just a little crazy, or gals if we prefer that as well. Characters who are a little bit kooky in the head and have their hair all frizzy, but at their core mean well. And sure, they may be eccentric and they hang out with the weird crowd and they hang out with people that could raise eyebrows in society, but it's like, they're not going to do anything. Who cares? They're just going to invent a time machine and send the teenager back to 1955. Okay, they're going to do something weird, but it's a trope I wish we had more of in the modern age. It's something that was kind of a product of the 80s, and I really wish we brought it back. Mostly, again, because Christopher Lloyd is so very, very entertaining, and he says some funny things in funny ways. And I think as long as we cast somebody correct for it, we can pull it off. We can pull it off in current year 2025. So what I'm basically saying is I would like to audition for the crazy good-natured mad scientist in the next movie that decides to do it. Can I please get that role? Thank you. Bye. Okay. Whatever. Moving on. Here's one thing I also want to emphasize about the original Back to the Future before we go to break. Think about it for just a few seconds, and you will come to realize, as I did, that no matter how convoluted it sounds on paper, the biggest strength of the original Back to the Future is it's understandable. It's a movie about time travel that anybody can understand. It explains its premise pretty quickly. You understand it pretty quickly. You understand what Doc is saying. He doesn't talk in massive science jargon, and when he does, Marty's there to translate. But even then, it's because Marty is not the brightest tool in the shed. That's not the expression, doesn't matter. You can understand Back to the Future. You can explain Back to the Future to anybody. And that is the biggest strength of the movie. For being about a concept such as so convoluted as time travel, that is something we should celebrate, even to this day. With that being said, that's all I have to say about the original Back to the Future for now. We're going to go to break, and when we come back, we are going to talk about Back to the Future Part 2. 88.1 The Burg, your movie central. Welcome back to What to Watch Wednesdays. And for our second movie on the watch list tonight, we will be taking a look at Back to the Future Part 2 from 1989, available to rent from places such as Amazon, YouTube, and Fandango at home. For the basic plot summary of Back to the Future Part 2, we pick up right where the first Back to the Future movie left off. We now follow Marty and Doc Brown as they travel to the future of 2015 to save Marty's future children from inevitable disaster. Meanwhile, their time escapades have attracted the attention of the bully Biff in both the present 1985 and in the future 2015. Biff, the bully from the first movie, now decides to cause a bit of a problem with the space-time continuum. Ooh, the space-time continuum. Spooky science term that's said in every single time travel media ever. Ooh, are you spooked yet? I'm very spooked. So, let's get the elephant out of the room here very quickly. Who's Biff? Who on earth is Biff? Well, you see, he was kind of the main villain of the first movie in a way, and now he's more so the actual first villain of the second movie in more ways than one. So there's that. What about Biff can be said? Well, he's a bully. He calls everybody a butthead. He himself is a butthead. He's played by Tom Wilson, who does a great job, or Thomas Wilson. Let's think here. He's also a butthead. Can you tell that I like saying butthead? I really like saying butthead because it's his catchphrase and it's an insult I can say on the radio because it's not that explicit. It's just calling someone a butthead. It's really childish and stupid and immature, and that makes it very, very, very funny and very iconic too. You can call anybody a butthead. So there's that. I'm gonna move on before I say butthead again, and we're gonna talk about the fact that Biff is actually a really good villain. He's very dangerous and very physically imposing, but he's also like so stupid that he messes everything up, and that poses an actual threat because an idiot with a time machine can basically reinvent the entirety of history to the point where it's like he's so stupid he ends up being smart because he starts like tricking himself into like becoming the overlord of the future is basically what happens. Like, I'm not trying to spoil it. That's just like, that's the best way I can describe it. He's so stupid, he tricks himself into becoming the overlord of the future. That's a great villain. That's a great villain. I actually think that's a great writing choice. Because, like, keep in mind, in the first Back to the Future movie, the way Doc Brown invented the time machine was by slipping on a toilet, hitting his head on the sink, and going, I've just imagined a magical piece of future technology called the flux capacitor that will power my DeLorean that is a time machine. And it's like, when your series is based on that as the reason that your main device, the main like MacGuffin of the series has been invented in the first place, you can have a villain that's so stupid he tricks himself into being the overlord of the future. You've set it up to be that absurd and silly that when you have a villain like that, it's actually a huge benefit to the movie series, okay? That's what I'm getting at. That's what makes Biff great. He fits in with the tone perfectly. And again, he calls everybody a butthead. What's not to love about him? What's not to love about him? You can't not love Biff. I love Biff. He's hilarious. He's stupid. He's annoying. He's a bully. He's pathetic. He's got a lot of problems, and he says every single threat incorrectly. What's not to love about that? I'm going to move on, but just keep in mind, Biff's great. Unfortunately, he doesn't save Back to the Future Part 2 from being the weakest of the three. I went off on Biff because, honestly, I think he deserved it, because he was put in a movie that, granted, is not bad, but suffers from feeling like a sequel, feeling like a direct sequel, feeling like it was kind of made to capitalize on the first movie, and on top of that, feeling a bit aimless in its direction, feeling like it didn't really know where it wanted to go, what it wanted to establish, because we're going to the future of 2015. Okay, great. But then at some point, they come back to the present of 1985, and then they go back to 1955. I'm trying not to spoil what happens in those moments. Just keep in mind, that happens, and it's like, that's 3 time jumps. The first movie was kind of dependent on 1 time jump from 1985 to 1955. And you've put like 3 into your movie called Part 2. I don't think I have to tell the audience right now why that could be seen as a problem from a writing standpoint, and why that could feel like 3 separate stories combined into 1 movie. The math does itself on that explanation there. You can probably understand why I feel like Back to the Future Part 2 is more so 3 separate ideas jammed into 1, and it all turns out a bit awkward because of it. Granted, it's done by the same people who made the original Back to the Future. And one thing I wanted to mention about the original Back to the Future that I didn't get to because I was so busy talking about Doc Brown is the fact that despite having 2 separate plot lines of Marty needing to reunite his parents and also repair the time machine, both were so well developed and so intertwined with each other that it didn't really feel like 2 separate ideas. It really just felt like 1 central plot line carrying you through the movie, and it was so well developed that you didn't really notice that divergence. With Part 2, the problem with the development is they almost delay developing like 1/3 of the movie, and then they just go to the next part, and then the next third of the movie is pretty well developed, and then like the last third is also way better developed than the first third, but it's like, that's because it's this, and it's like, again, I'm trying not to spoil too much of it, but like, it felt like they didn't plant the seeds of the plot thread correctly at the beginning of Part 2 to make the rest of it feel worth it. And when you have 3 separate sections of the movie, that first section is going to stick out like a sore thumb, and it's going to go like, why is this here? What's going on here? This feels cheap, and this feels like we're just aimlessly wandering around, because we kind of are. And now that we're in the second third, it's like, well, we've just come from that first third. Like, what's the point here now? Again, I want to give them props. It's not a bad movie. It's not a boring movie. It's just a bit aimless at times, and it is nowhere near as good as the original Back to the Future. I did not like this as much as the original Back to the Future. What I can give them credit for is the fact that in comparison to even the original Back to the Future, this one, the visual effects, the 3D effects that are pretty new for 1989, look great. They look better than I was expecting them to look for 1989. I was expecting them to look much worse. They actually pulled out all the stops and managed to do some effects that look good for their time. Now, that doesn't mean they look perfect, but we've got a flying DeLorean on screen mixed with the physical model of the DeLorean, and I feel like the transition between the flying one and the physical model was done pretty well. It's not super jarring. You can kind of just like ignore any of the rough spots. You can ignore the rough spots. That's what's important with visual effects. If you can ignore the rough spots, that's all that matters. And more importantly, there are times where certain actors, like let's say Michael J. Fox is playing a current version of Marty and an older version of Marty in 2015. Let's say the 2 of them are on screen at the same time. Let's just say, for example, again, no spoilers, but let's say they're on screen. They are actually able to composite both versions of Michael J. Fox on screen at the same time with very little overlap or very little visual problems. It actually looks kind of seamless at points. Granted, there's hiccups here and there, but you can ignore the hiccups. You just can't ignore the story hiccups with part 2, which is really unfortunate because visual effects wise, it's pretty ahead of its time and it looks really good for its time. But, you know, the story has to come first, and that's why I've criticized it. So, with all that being said, we are going to go to our next break, and when we come back, we will jump into Back to the Future Part 3. 88.1 The Burg, your movie central. Welcome back to What to Watch Wednesdays. And for our third and final movie on the watch list tonight, we will be taking a look at Back to the Future Part 3 from 1990, available to rent from places such as Amazon, YouTube, and Fandango at Home. For the basic plot summary of Back to the Future Part 3, we pick up right after the events of Part 2, so spoilers there. But we follow Marty McFly as he must travel back to 1885 in order to save his friend Doc Brown from his untimely death in the Old West. I'm pausing here for a moment because I want to emphasize that in comparison to how I described the plot summaries from the original Back to the Future and even Back to the Future Part 2, that sounds relatively straightforward for a plot, doesn't it? I mean, keep in mind, part of that is because you don't know, if you haven't seen Part 2 before, you don't know how that movie ends, and so it's kind of contingent on that, and I've kind of just dropped in, oh, he goes back to 1850. But weirdly, it still sounds like the most straightforward on paper. And it's like, that's weird to say for Part 3 especially. Just food for thought as we get into the movie here. Just kind of munch on that with your brain. I don't know why we call it food for thought. That doesn't make any sense. Your brain doesn't eat food. What does that expression mean? We're going to move on. So let me kind of square away something that I mentioned in the last review, which was the review of Part 2. Part 3. Back to the Future Part 3 is better than Back to the Future Part 2. I remember reading online in places such as that it was going to be better than Part 2, and so I was kind of looking forward to it because of that. I will say that in my opinion, I don't think it's better by that much. I think the margin is kind of small. I don't think it's a massive improvement like I was expecting it to be. I think it's an improvement over Part 2, but in comparison, it's still not as good as the original. It's still nowhere near as good as the original Back to the Future. And that's just my opinion, but I was expecting a higher kind of increase in quality, and when I didn't get that, I walked away just a little disappointed, so there's that. I figured it'd be worth it to start off on kind of that foot, because when it comes to the overall movie of Back to the Future Part 3, I feel like I can say some things here and there, but I definitely have a lot less to say about it than the first two combined. I feel like this is going to be the shortest review out of the three, and because of that, I'm kind of just like getting it set up. So let's talk about the movie's qualities. One of the biggest benefits that Part 3 has over Part 2 and Part 1, even comparatively, is that it likes to take its time. I've seen plenty of Part 3 movies, or, third installments in movie series. The two off the top of my head that I could use this example for would be Alien 3 and Matrix Revolutions. Both of them have this issue of being the third movie and feeling like they kind of have to rush to the end, especially the third Matrix movie. It feels like it has to rush to the end and not really develop enough of it, because it was like hinging on the last part. And credit where credit is due, Back to the Future Part 3 does in fact take its time. It doesn't rush. It takes its time. Haha, you get it. It's about time travel. It takes its time. That's a dumb pun. It doesn't rush. If you wanted to spin that negatively, which I'm now going to do, you could say it's slow and verging on being somewhat boring. I wouldn't say it's boring, but it's slow. It's very slow paced in comparison, to the point of it also being a detriment. which is a new thing to say, especially for a movie about time travel. Who would have thought that a time travel movie might struggle with pacing, especially compared to the original, where the pacing was like amazing? That's really weird to say, but it feels right, so I'm not going to take it back. I personally stand by that being my opinion. I think that part 3 takes way too long to get to the point. And I want to say that has something to do with the fact that it's themed around the Old West. And I almost feel like they wanted to pay homage to Sergio Leone movies, old spaghetti westerns, Good, Bad, and the Ugly, where they are very slow paced for a reason and build up tension and build up like suspense. But this is like a movie from 1990 where the last 2 movies have been this like fun romp through time travel with like crazy experiments and crazy scientist and doofy kid from the 80s. Tonally, it doesn't fit all that well. It kind of sticks out just a little bit too much. I mean, when it comes to its theming of the Old West, you've got the main music theme, which is a great music theme, by the way. I didn't mention it with the first movie, but the main theme music of the Back to the Future series, perfection, beautiful, love it. They actually managed to play it on harmonica for part 3, and that sounds really cool. They've even slapped kind of a filter and kind of desaturated all the colors to make it look very dirty and grimy, and it looks like it's from 1990 for sure. And it's not as heavily reliant on, the 3D visual effects from part 2, so it feels very thematically in tone with the West. But at the same time, it doesn't feel like the other 2 Back to the Future movies. I don't want to say like it's different, so that means it's bad. It just doesn't feel like it fits as well. And that's what makes it kind of lack. Granted, I think it's better at achieving its goals than part 2. It feels like it has a more direct plot line, which is, again, save Doc Brown from being killed. Okay, we can follow that. Again, it sounds straightforward on paper, even compared to the other 2. So it's got that going for it. It just wasn't the improvement in quality that I was hoping from part 2. Because part 2 left me feeling a little disoriented and going, okay, I don't know exactly what I just watched. That's like a sequel to like one of the most well-known movies of all time. And I feel like I didn't get the enjoyment I was hoping to get out of it as a sequel. And now here comes part 3, and I'm still left with that somewhat empty feeling. And I want to emphasize that even though I was left feeling that way, I don't want to seem like I didn't enjoy either of these movies. Part 2 and part 3 especially. I enjoyed the first Back to the Future. I enjoyed Back to the Future Part 2 for its own individual reasons, and I enjoyed Back to the Future Part 3 enough. In terms of trilogies, I will say that the Back to the Future trilogy certainly is one that you can watch. It's certainly inoffensive in comparison to some others out there. You've got Alien 3, which kind of ruined the other 2 Alien movies for sure. You've got Matrix 3, which was bad. In comparison to those 2, Back to the Future's way better. I would actually honestly recommend all 3 of these movies. I'd especially recommend the first one over the other 2 if you haven't seen it before, or it's been a long time since you've seen it, like it was for me. But you could do a lot worse for a second and third movie, is the point I'm trying to get at. You could do so much worse. And the fact that they were able to maintain a consistent enough level of quality without a lot of falling off is something to be commended. And speaking of things that don't fall off in quality, I really hope that this was a satisfactory first episode back for What to Watch Wednesdays, and let's hope that the show does not fall off in quality as the school year goes on. It's not going to. I can make a promise right here and now. It's not going to. And speaking of the show not falling off in quality, thank you for listening in to What to Watch Wednesdays tonight. If you want to follow along with the show, please follow along on Instagram at What to Watch Wednesdays, all one word, no caps, no spaces, and on YouTube at What to Watch Wednesdays, all one word, no caps, no spaces. With all that being said, I will also be back next Wednesday from 8 to 9 p.m. here on 88.1 The Burg, where I'll be telling you all what to watch. Good night, everybody.